The October air cuts through my jacket as I sit on the edge of this rooftop, legs dangling over the side, like I'm 22 again instead of 30. The beer in my hand has gone warm, condensation still clinging to the bottle like tears I haven't shed, even though I haven't taken a sip in the last 20 minutes. Below me, Chicago spreads out in all directions, a constellation of windows and streetlights and lives I'll never know. The sounds drift up from 6 floors down. Couples walking hand in hand down the sidewalk, their voices soft and intimate. Groups spilling out of bars with that loose, careless laughter that only comes after the third drink, after inhibitions dissolve and the world feels manageable again. The kind of laughter I used to be part of before everything got so complicated. My phone sits face up on the concrete beside me, its black screen reflecting the distant lights like a dark mirror. But I can still see the message burned into my vision, white text against blue that appeared 3 hours ago and changed everything. You okay? I didn't mean to be weird earlier. 7 words that have kept me up here in the cold instead of downstairs in my apartment, where it's warm and safe and empty and doesn't ask questions I can't answer. I keep reading it over and over. The way you press on a bruise to see if it still hurts. The way you can't stop tonguing a loose tooth even though you know it's only making things worse. It does hurt. It always does with Owen. Every text, every call, every moment of his attention feels like a gift and a punishment wrapped in the same beautiful, impossible package. 3 nights ago feels like 3 years and 3 minutes at the same time. We were at another party, another rooftop, another night that started innocent enough. Someone's birthday, though I can't remember whose now. The details blur together after all these years of shared celebrations, shared spaces, shared everything except the one thing that matters most. The music was too loud, some indie band I'd never heard of, and the October wind whipped through the crowd, making everyone huddle closer together for warmth. I remember the whiskey burning down my throat, cheap stuff from a plastic bottle that someone's friend had brought. I remember how Owen's knee bumped against mine when we sat on the ledge, our legs hanging over the side, just like I'm sitting now. We were talking about nothing and everything the way we always do, the way we always did. His work, my work, some movie we'd both seen, the Cubs' disappointing season. Safe topics that dance around the edges of what we really want to say. But then the conversation shifted, the way it sometimes does after midnight and whiskey. Owen's voice got that particular softness it takes on after a few drinks. The one where his guard comes down and the careful distance he usually maintains starts to crumble. Where he says things that make me wonder if I'm imagining the weight behind his words or if I'm finally hearing what's always been there. You're the only one who really gets me, man. That's what he said, leaning close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with whiskey and something else, something that was just him. Something warm and familiar that I've been breathing in for 10 years without ever acknowledging how much I need it. His eyes were heavy, unfocused from the alcohol, but they stayed on mine longer than they should have. Longer than friends look at each other. Long enough for me to see something flicker there, something vulnerable and terrified and real. For a moment, just a moment, I thought he might say more. Thought he might finally cross that invisible line we've been walking for a decade. The words hung in the air between us like smoke, heavy with possibility and everything we've never said. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, could feel the weight of 10 years of almost moments pressing down on us both. But then I laughed. Of course I laughed. That's what I do. That's what I've always done when Owen gets too close to saying something we can't take back. When the truth threatens to spill out and change everything between us. I made some joke about him being drunk, about how he'd regret being so sentimental in the morning, about how he always gets emotional when he's had too much whiskey. He laughed too, but it sounded hollow, like an echo in an empty room, like something breaking quietly in the dark. An hour later, I watched him kiss some girl with blonde hair and red lipstick near the makeshift bar. Watched him thread his fingers through her hair the way I've imagined his fingers in mine 1,000 times. Watched him press her against the wall with the same intensity I've dreamed about, the same focus I've craved. I left without saying goodbye. Now I'm here, holding this phone like it might explode, scrolling through years of digital memories. There we are in our college dorm, both of us too young and too stupid to understand what we were building. Road trip photos where we look sun-drunk and invincible. Blurry selfies from late nights when the world felt like it belonged to just us. In every single picture, there's something there. A tenderness in how we lean into each other. A familiarity that goes deeper than friendship but never quite becomes something else. The city lights blur as my eyes water from the cold wind cutting across the rooftop. Or that's what I tell myself, because admitting the truth would mean acknowledging how many nights I've spent like this, holding my phone and scrolling through our history, looking for signs I might have missed. The question that's been haunting me for 10 years sits heavy in my chest like a stone I've been carrying, demanding an answer I'm not sure I'm ready to give. What are we really? What have we been all this time, in all those moments when it felt like more than friendship but never quite became something else? And why does the possibility of finding out feel exactly like standing at the edge of this rooftop, knowing that once you jump, there's no going back to solid ground, no pretending you didn't leap? I pick up my phone again, the metal cold against my palm. The cursor blinks in the empty reply box, patient and persistent, waiting for words that won't come. Always waiting. Just like I've been waiting my whole adult life for Owen to say what he almost said 3 nights ago, to mean what I've always hoped he meant, for this thing between us to finally have a name that makes sense of all the years of almosts and maybes. But some questions are too dangerous to ask out loud, too fragile to survive in daylight. Some truths are too heavy to carry when you're not sure the other person is strong enough to help you hold them. So I set the phone down again, place it carefully on the concrete like it might shatter, and let the October wind carry away the words I'll never send, the reply I'll never give, the conversation we'll never have. I climb down from the rooftop eventually, though my apartment feels no warmer than the October air outside. Everything here is exactly where I left it this morning, exactly where it's been for months. The kind of careful arrangement that comes from living alone for too long, from having no one to mess up your systems or leave their coffee mug on the wrong counter. My apartment is a study in controlled emptiness. Clean lines, neutral colors, furniture that looks expensive but feels cold. The books are arranged by height on floating shelves. The throw pillows are perfectly fluffed. Even the magazines on the coffee table are fanned out at precise angles, like a showroom display of a life no one actually lives. I designed it this way, of course. That's what I do for work. What I've been doing for the past 6 years at Morrison & Associates, a design firm downtown where we create spaces for other people to live their messy, complicated lives. My desk sits in a corner of an open-plan office with white walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, surrounded by other quiet professionals who speak in hushed tones about color palettes and spatial flow. We design homes full of warmth and character for clients while working in a space that feels like an elegant hospital. The irony isn't lost on me. I spend my days creating intimacy for strangers while living in a space that feels like a museum of one person's carefully curated solitude. Every Sunday, I meet my sister Vanessa for brunch at the same cafe on Lincoln Avenue. She orders the same thing every time, avocado toast with extra lime, and I get coffee that's too expensive and eggs I never finish. She studies my face across the small table, her dark eyes searching for cracks in the facade I've perfected over the years. "You're too good at being alone," she told me last week, stirring sugar into her coffee with the same worried expression she's worn since we were kids. "It's not healthy, Julian. You need to let people in." I assured her I was fine, the same lie I've been telling her for years. The same lie I tell myself most mornings when I wake up in a bed that's too big for one person, in an apartment where the only sounds are the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic below. But there's one person who doesn't knock before entering my carefully constructed world. Owen has had a key to my apartment since I moved in 3 years ago. He uses it without apology, appearing in my doorway with takeout containers or beer or just the restless energy that seems to follow him everywhere. He helps himself to whatever's in my refrigerator, kicks his shoes off by the door, and settles onto my couch like he's been living here all along. Owen teaches 5th grade at a public school on the north side, coaching basketball after hours and coming home with stories about kids who remind him why he loves what he does. His life has the kind of messiness mine lacks. Dog hair on his jacket from Murphy, his golden retriever who sheds everywhere and has no sense of personal space. Grass stains on his khakis from recess duty. The easy chaos of someone who doesn't spend his evenings arranging throw pillows or organizing his bookshelf by color. He has a girlfriend, Harper, who's been around for 8 months now. She's beautiful in an effortless way, all long blonde hair and genuine laughter, the kind of woman who looks perfect in Owen's Instagram photos at baseball games and farmers markets. She's kind, too, which makes it harder to resent her the way I know I should. The three of us have dinners sometimes, these careful evenings where I play the role of the supportive best friend while watching Owen's hand rest on the small of her back, watching him lean in to whisper something that makes her smile. I've become an expert at excusing myself early from these gatherings, claiming early morning meetings or non-existent plans. But when it's just Owen and me, something shifts. The boundaries blur in ways that probably shouldn't feel as natural as they do. He falls asleep during movies, his head heavy against my shoulder, and I stay perfectly still until the credits roll, afraid to wake him, afraid to break whatever spell keeps him there. Our hugs last longer than they should, his arms tight around my back like he's afraid I might disappear if he lets go too quickly. We talk on the phone late at night when Harper's at her book club or visiting her sister. Long conversations about nothing that stretch past midnight. Our voices getting softer as the hours pass, more honest in the darkness. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what we're really talking about underneath all the casual words, what we're really saying when he tells me about his day or asks about mine. For 10 years, I've told myself this is enough. This careful friendship with its unspoken rules and invisible boundaries. Owen is straight, has always been straight, will always be straight. I've built my entire understanding of our relationship around this one immutable fact, used it as a foundation for every interaction, every suppressed feeling, every moment I've convinced myself means less than it does. But lately, something has been shifting between us, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of our carefully maintained normal. I feel it in the way his eyes linger on me when he thinks I'm not looking, in the way he finds excuses to touch my arm when he's making a point, to stand just a little too close when we're cooking dinner together in my pristine kitchen. Owen feels it too, I think, though he works harder to ignore it. He mentions Harper more often than he used to, drops her name into conversations like a shield. He talks about their future plans, their weekend trips, the apartment they're thinking of getting together. But there's something hollow in his voice when he says these things, like he's trying to convince himself as much as me. I want to believe I'm imagining it all, that the shift I feel is just my own wishful thinking projected onto moments that mean nothing more than they ever have. But then I remember 3 nights ago, the weight in his voice when he said I was the only one who really got him, and I know something fundamental has changed between us. The question is whether either of us is brave enough to acknowledge what that something might be. The work event happens on a Thursday in November, one of those mandatory networking things where we're supposed to mingle with potential clients over expensive wine and tiny appetizers that disappear in one bite. I'm standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker on as the sun sets, when someone says my name. I turn around, and there's this man I've never seen before, maybe my age, with dark hair and kind eyes and the sort of quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. He introduces himself as Mateo, says he's seen my work in the portfolio Morrison keeps in their lobby, mentions a residential project I did last year that apparently caught his attention. We start talking about design, about the way spaces can hold memory, about how the best rooms feel like they've been lived in even when they're brand new. He gets it in a way that most people don't, understands that what we're really doing is creating containers for human emotion. His voice is warm, thoughtful, and when he laughs at something I say, it sounds genuine rather than polite. Hours pass without me noticing. The crowd thins around us, colleagues drifting away to their cars and their Thursday night routines, but we keep talking. About books we've both read, about the feeling of being seen too late in life, about how strange it is to spend your 30s wondering if you've been living someone else's version of your story. When he gives me his business card, his fingers brush mine for just a moment, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Not the desperate longing I've grown accustomed to with Owen, but something simpler and more complicated at the same time. Possibility. It takes me 3 days to text him. 3 days of staring at his number in my phone, typing messages and deleting them, convincing myself that the connection I felt was one-sided, that I misread the warmth in his eyes. When I finally send a simple message about getting coffee, he responds within an hour. The coffee turns into dinner. Dinner turns into a long walk along the lake, talking until the city quiets around us. Mateo doesn't play games, doesn't make me guess what he's thinking. When he says he'd like to see me again, he means it. When he asks about my life, he listens to the answers. I don't tell Owen about Mateo at first. It feels too new, too fragile to expose to the complicated gravity of our friendship. But Owen has always been able to read me better than I can read myself, and it doesn't take long for him to notice the shift in my mood. The way I check my phone more often, the small smile I can't quite suppress when I'm texting. Finally dating someone. He asks one evening when we're watching a basketball game at my apartment, his tone carefully casual, but his eyes sharp with something I can't name. The question hangs in the air between us, loaded with 10 years of unspoken assumptions. I tell him about Mateo, keep it simple, mention the work connection and the coffee date. Owen nods, says that's great, that it's about time, but there's a tension underneath his words that wasn't there before. A careful distance in the way he sits on the opposite end of the couch, and how quickly he finishes his beer and finds an excuse to leave. After that, Owen starts showing up more often. Not in the easy, comfortable way he used to, but with a restless energy that fills my apartment like smoke. He makes comments, pointed observations disguised as friendly interest. Mateo again? You guys must be getting serious. There's something sharp in his voice when he says Mateo's name, like it tastes bitter on his tongue. I start noticing how Harper watches us during the few dinners we still share, her blue eyes moving between Owen and me with an expression I can't quite read. She doesn't say anything, but she doesn't need to. There's a knowledge in her silence that makes me uncomfortable, like she sees something I'm not ready to acknowledge. I brush it all off, tell myself Owen's just being protective, that 10 years of friendship has earned him the right to be curious about the men I date, that it's nothing more than what it's always been. But then Mateo comes over for dinner on a Tuesday night in December, and everything changes. We're in my kitchen, talking and laughing while I attempt to cook something more ambitious than takeout, when Owen's key turns in the lock. He walks in like he always does, calls out a greeting, but stops short when he sees Mateo sitting at my counter, wine glass in hand, looking perfectly at home in my carefully controlled space. The introductions are awkward, Owen's handshake lasting a beat too long, his smile too bright and somehow aggressive. He accepts my offer of a drink, then another, settling into my living room like he has no intention of leaving. The conversation becomes stilted, Owen inserting himself into every exchange, steering topics away from anything that might create intimacy between Mateo and me. As the evening wears on, Owen's comments become more pointed, his laughter louder and less genuine. He tells stories about our college days, about our friendship, marking his territory with shared history and inside jokes. When Mateo excuses himself to use the bathroom, Owen leans forward, his eyes bright with alcohol and something desperate. Don't worry, I'm straight, he says with a laugh that doesn't land, doesn't sound like anything he's ever said before. The words hang in the air like broken glass, cutting through whatever pretense we've been maintaining. I watch Mateo's expression when he returns, see the moment he understands what he's walked into. But there's no jealousy in his eyes, no possessiveness. Just concern, gentle and patient, like he's watching someone he cares about navigate something dangerous. Owen finally leaves around midnight, his goodbye too loud, his hug lasting longer than it should. After the door closes, the silence in my apartment feels different, charged with questions I'm not ready to answer. Mateo helps me clean up, his movements careful and thoughtful in my kitchen. He doesn't ask about Owen, doesn't push for explanations I can't give. But when he kisses me goodnight at the door, There's a tenderness there that feels like forgiveness for something I haven't admitted yet. Later, lying in bed, I think about Owen's words, about the way he said he was straight like he was trying to convince himself as much as us. I think about the desperate edge in his voice, the way he looked at Mateo like a threat to something he can't name. For the first time in 10 years, I let myself wonder if maybe Owen isn't as certain about anything as either of us has always pretended. Mateo and I fall into a rhythm over the next few weeks, something easy and unhurried that feels completely foreign after years of analyzing every interaction with Owen. When Mateo texts, it's because he wants to talk to me. When he asks how my day was, he listens to the answer. When he touches my hand across a restaurant table, it's simple and uncomplicated, without the weight of a decade's worth of unspoken questions. Our connection is different from anything I've experienced before. Quiet where Owen and I are intense. Thoughtful where we are reactive. Mateo asks real questions, the kind that require honest answers. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? When was the last time you felt truly seen? Why do you think you're so comfortable living alone? I don't always have answers, but he doesn't seem to mind. He waits while I think. Let silence exist between us without rushing to fill it. With Owen, every pause feels loaded with everything we're not saying. With Mateo, silence feels like its own kind of conversation. Meanwhile, Owen's behavior becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. He texts me at strange hours, messages that arrive at 2 in the morning asking if I'm awake, if I want to grab a drink, if I remember some random story from college. When I don't respond immediately, he sends follow-ups that get progressively more urgent, more scattered. He picks fights over small things. When I tell him I can't watch the game on Sunday because I have plans with Mateo, he goes quiet for a long moment before saying I'm different now, that I never used to choose other people over him. When I point out that he has Harper, that he's done the same thing countless times, he just shakes his head like I'm missing something obvious. You're changing, he says one evening when we're supposed to be having dinner, but he's barely touched his food. There's an accusation in his voice, like change is something I'm doing to hurt him rather than something that happens naturally when you stop trying so hard to stay the same. I want to ask what version of me he wants me to stay frozen as, what carefully curated Julian he's so afraid of losing. But I don't, because I'm starting to suspect the answer would break something between us that can't be repaired. The breaking point comes on a Thursday afternoon when I finally say the words out loud, in the small office where I've been going to therapy for the past 6 months. Dr. Reeves sits across from me in her leather chair, patient and non-judgmental as always, waiting for me to find my way to whatever truth I've been circling around for weeks. I think I've been in love with Owen for 10 years, I say, and my voice breaks on the admission like it's been holding the weight of those words for longer than I can measure. The sound that comes out of me is raw, desperate, like something that's been trapped in my chest finally finding its way to air. Dr. Reeves doesn't look surprised. She simply nods, the way she does when I finally arrive at something she's been watching me approach for months. How does that feel, saying it out loud? Like I've been lying to myself for half my adult life, I tell her. Like every decision I've made, every relationship I've avoided, every careful distance I've maintained has been in service of this one impossible feeling. Sitting in that small, quiet room, I let myself remember moments I've spent years rewriting, explaining away, filing under friendship. College nights when we shared a bed because the dorm was too cold, Owen's body warm against mine, his arm thrown carelessly across my chest like it belonged there. The way he held me when my father had his heart attack, solid and steady while I fell apart in his arms, whispering that everything would be okay in a voice so gentle it made me believe him. I remember the almost kiss from junior year that we never talked about again, both of us drunk on cheap wine and the kind of loneliness that comes from being 20 and thinking you know who you are. We were on his bed, supposedly studying, but we'd given up pretending hours ago. The conversation had gotten deep the way it did sometimes, both of us saying things we usually kept hidden. Our faces were close, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel his breath warm against my skin. For a moment that lasted forever and no time at all, we just looked at each other, suspended in possibility. Then his phone rang. Some girl he was seeing, and the moment shattered like glass. We never mentioned it. The next morning, we acted like nothing had happened, and I convinced myself that nothing had. But I remember the weight of that almost, the way it followed me around for months afterward like a ghost. There have been so many almosts over the years. Moments when the careful boundaries we've built feel thin as paper, when I catch him looking at me with an expression I can't quite name. Times when his touch lingers longer than it should, when his voice gets soft in a way that makes my chest tight with hope and terror. I've explained every single one of them away. Told myself it was friendship, that I was seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was actually there. But sitting in Dr. Reeves' office, saying the truth out loud for the first time, I realize how much energy I've spent convincing myself that love could be mistaken for anything else. The sessions after that are harder, more honest. We talk about the ways I've shaped my life around Owen's comfort, the careful distances I've maintained to keep him close without threatening the version of our friendship he needs. We talk about how exhausting it is to love someone quietly, to carry feelings that have nowhere to go. I start pulling back, not dramatically but gradually, creating the space I need to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly managing my feelings for him. I stop responding to his late-night texts immediately. I make plans with Mateo that I don't cancel when Owen wants to hang out. I stop being available every time he needs me. Stop being the person he can count on to drop everything when he calls. Owen notices immediately. He shows up at my apartment more often, stays longer, drinks more when he's there. He makes comments about Mateo that get sharper each time, observations that sound like jokes but cut like criticism. He asks if I'm okay, if something's wrong, if he's done something to upset me. The questions are genuine, his confusion real, and that makes it worse somehow. Because part of him truly doesn't understand why I'm pulling away, can't see the pattern that's been building between us for years. He wants me to stay exactly where I've always been, available but not demanding, close but not too close, loving him in a way that costs me everything and asks nothing of him in return. You're not going to forget about me, right? He asks one night when we're sitting on my couch, the question coming out of nowhere in the middle of a conversation about work. There's something young and vulnerable in his voice, something that reminds me of the 20-year-old boy who used to tell me his secrets in our dorm room. I want to tell him that forgetting him would be like forgetting how to breathe, that he's written into every important memory I have, that loving him has been the most constant thing in my adult life, even when it was killing me slowly. Instead, I tell him he's being dramatic, that 10 years of friendship doesn't disappear overnight. But we both know something is shifting between us, that the careful balance we've maintained for so long is finally breaking down. What neither of us knows yet is whether what emerges from the wreckage will be worth everything we're about to lose. Harper leaves on a Tuesday evening in January, and I don't find out until Owen shows up at my door the next night, drunk and hollow-eyed, and carrying the kind of silence that comes after something important breaks. He doesn't tell me what happened at first, just stands in my doorway swaying slightly, his coat unbuttoned despite the bitter cold, his hair disheveled like he's been running his hands through it for hours. When I ask if he's okay, he laughs, but it sounds more like a sob. She left, he says simply, and I know without asking that he means Harper. Can I come in? I step aside and he stumbles past me into my living room, immediately gravitating toward the bottle of whiskey I keep on the shelf but rarely touch. He pours himself 3 fingers without asking, drinks half of it in one swallow, then sits heavily on my floor with his back against the couch like his legs won't hold him anymore. I wait. I've learned over the years that Owen needs time to find his words when he's hurting, needs space to arrange whatever's broken inside him into something he can explain. But tonight feels different, heavier somehow, like the silence between us is holding the weight of everything we've never said. She knew, he says finally, staring down at the whiskey in his hands. Harper knew. About us, I mean. About how I feel about you. The words hit me like cold water, sudden and shocking. I sit down across from him, not trusting my legs to keep me upright, and wait for him to continue. She said she'd been waiting for me to figure it out for months. Said she could see it in how I talked about you, how I acted when you were around. Owen's voice is quiet, almost ashamed, like he's confessing to something terrible rather than something I've been hoping to hear for 10 years. He takes another drink, winces, sets the glass down on my coffee table with shaking hands. I hope you figure it out. That's what she said when she left. Not angry, not hurt, just tired. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for too long and was finally allowed to put it down. My heart is beating so hard I'm sure he can hear it, but I don't say anything. Some part of me knows that if I speak now, if I interrupt whatever dam is finally breaking inside him, he might never find the courage to say what needs to be said. Owen looks up at me then, and his eyes are red-rimmed and desperate and more honest than I've ever seen them. I don't know what I'm doing, Julian. I've never known what I'm doing when it comes to you. He leans his head back against my couch, closes his eyes like the weight of looking at me is too much to bear. I think I've always been afraid of how I feel about you. Like if I never say it out loud, it won't be real. Like I could keep pretending it was just friendship, just brotherhood, just two guys who care about each other in a completely normal way. Each word feels like a small explosion in my chest, like everything I've been carrying for years is finally being acknowledged, given shape and weight and reality. But it's not normal, is it? Owen's voice cracks on the question. Normal friends don't get jealous every time you talk to someone else. They don't spend hours analyzing every conversation, looking for hidden meaning in everything you say. They don't lie awake at night thinking about what it would feel like to cross that line they've drawn in their head. I got jealous every time you talk to someone else, he continues, the words tumbling out now like he can't stop them, like 10 years of silence is finally breaking open. I hated the idea of you loving anyone who wasn't me, but I didn't know what to do with that feeling, didn't know where to put it. The confession hangs in the air between us, heavy and fragile and transformative. I want to move, want to reach for him, want to close the distance that suddenly feels both infinite and non-existent. But something holds me still, some instinct that tells me this moment needs to exist exactly as it is, that adding touch or movement would shatter whatever spell is allowing him to finally tell the truth. When you started seeing Mateo, Owen says, opening his eyes to look at me again, I felt like I was losing my mind. Like someone was taking something that belonged to me, even though I had no right to feel that way. Even though I'd never said anything, never done anything to claim you. His voice drops to almost a whisper. I've been so afraid, Julian. Afraid of what it would mean if I admitted how I feel. Afraid of losing you if I said too much. Afraid of who I am if I'm not the person I've always thought I was. We sit there in silence for a long time after that, the weight of his words settling around us like snow. Neither of us moves. Neither of us speaks. We just exist in this new reality where the truth has finally been spoken, where the careful distance we've maintained for 10 years has collapsed into something raw and honest and terrifying. My heart feels like it's breaking and healing at the same time. Like every careful wall I've built around my feelings for Owen is crumbling and revealing something too big to contain. But there's grief in it too, for all the years we've wasted, for all the moments we've explained away, for the time we've lost to fear and denial, and the stories we've told ourselves about who we are and what we're allowed to want. It's the first completely honest moment we've ever shared, and it changes everything between us without changing anything at all. Because even now, with the truth finally spoken, we're still just two people sitting on opposite sides of a room, afraid to touch what we've built between us, afraid to find out if it's strong enough to survive being real. Owen sleeps on my couch that night, curled up under the blanket I bring him after he finally stops talking and starts breathing like someone who might actually rest. I watch him for a while from the doorway of my bedroom. This man who has just rearranged everything I thought I knew about my life. And I feel simultaneously like I'm seeing him for the first time and like I've been looking at him my whole life without really seeing anything at all. In the morning, he's gone before I wake up, leaving only the folded blanket and a coffee mug in the sink as evidence that any of it happened. For a moment, I wonder if I dreamed the whole thing, if 10 years of wanting finally drove me to hallucinate the conversation I've been longing for. But then I see his glass still sitting on my coffee table, still carrying the faint smell of whiskey and confession. I don't hear from him for 3 days. No texts, No unexpected appearances at my door, no late-night phone calls. The silence feels strange after weeks of his increasingly desperate attempts to maintain our connection, like the eye of a storm that leaves you wondering if the worst has passed or if it's still coming. It's Mateo who breaks the spell. He notices the change in me immediately, the way I've been distracted during our conversations, present in body, but somewhere else entirely in mind. We're having dinner at his apartment, something simple and warm that he cooked while I sat at his kitchen counter pretending to help, when he finally asks the question I've been dreading. Are you still in love with him? The words hang in the air between us, gentle but unavoidable. Mateo's voice carries no accusation, no jealousy, just the quiet certainty of someone who already knows the answer but needs to hear it spoken aloud. I should say no. I should tell him that whatever I felt for Owen was just the ghost of old feelings, that I've moved on, that what we have together is real and present and worth choosing. I should be able to look at this kind, patient man who has shown me what healthy love looks like and say that I choose him. Choose this. Choose a future that makes sense. But I hesitate. For just a moment, but long enough for both of us to understand what my silence means. Mateo nods slowly, sets down his fork, and looks at me with an expression that breaks my heart because it's so full of understanding rather than anger. I deserve someone who's sure, Julian. Someone who doesn't have to think about whether they want to be with me. He's right, of course. He deserves someone whose heart isn't divided. Someone who can love him completely rather than loving him around the edges of something else. He deserves better than being the safe choice, the healthy choice, the choice that makes sense but doesn't set anything on fire. We don't break up that night because we were never really together in the way that requires formal ending. We just acknowledge what we both already know, that sometimes love isn't enough when it's not the only love, when it has to compete with something older and more complicated and more destructive. He hugs me goodbye at his door, and it feels like forgiveness and loss wrapped in the same gesture. I go home to my empty apartment and sit in the same spot where Owen made his confession, trying to make sense of what I'm supposed to do with this gift I've waited 10 years to receive. Now that I finally know Owen feels something for me too, now that the truth has been spoken and the careful boundaries we've maintained have dissolved, I have no idea what comes next. I think about every version of my life I could choose. The safe one where I find another Mateo, someone kind and uncomplicated who loves me in a way that doesn't require archaeology, who doesn't carry 10 years of history and hurt and careful distance. The honest one where I pursue what Owen and I have finally admitted exists between us, where we try to build something real from the ruins of our friendship. The one that never was, where we had this conversation in college and saved ourselves a decade of pretending. None of them feel entirely real, entirely possible. They all require a version of myself I'm not sure I know how to be. I drive to the lake on Friday evening, needing the kind of space that only comes from water and sky, and the feeling of being very small in something very large. I sit on a bench near the shore and watch the sun disappear behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that remind me of Owen's laugh, of Mateo's eyes, of every beautiful thing I've ever been too afraid to reach for. My phone buzzes against my leg. A text from Owen, simple and devastating. I miss you. 3 words that contain everything and nothing. That could mean he misses our friendship, or that he misses what we almost had, or that he misses the version of himself that could speak honestly about how he feels. 3 words that ask for everything without promising anything in return. I don't respond. Instead, I drive home and sit at my kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pen, trying to write down everything I can't say out loud. The letter becomes 3 letters, really. 1 to Owen, and 1 to Mateo, and 1 to myself. Explaining choices I can't make and feelings I can't untangle, and apologies for hurting people I love by loving them imperfectly. To Owen, I write about 10 years of careful distance and the weight of carrying feelings that had nowhere to go. About how his confession felt like coming home and coming apart at the same time. About how I don't know if we can build something real from so much history of almost. To Mateo, I write about kindness and timing and the terrible irony of meeting the right person at the wrong moment. about how he showed me what healthy love looks like and how sorry I am that I couldn't choose it when I had the chance. To myself, I write about forgiveness, about the courage to want things that might destroy you, about the difference between love and fear and the places where they intersect. When I finish, I fold the pages carefully and place them in the drawer of my bedside table, next to old birthday cards and spare batteries and all the other small things that seem important enough to keep but too private to share. Then I pick up my phone and scroll through my contacts until I find the number I need. My finger hovers over it for a long moment, understanding that whatever call I make will determine which version of my life I choose to live. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times before someone answers. 3 months later, I understand that some stories don't end the way you expect them to when you're in the middle of living them. I never made that phone call. I sat there for 20 minutes, my finger hovering over the contact, before finally setting the phone aside and going to bed. Some decisions, I realized, are made by not making them, by letting silence speak louder than any words you could choose. My apartment looks the same but feels different now, less like a museum of careful solitude and more like a place where someone actually lives. There are dishes in the sink sometimes, books left open on the coffee table. The throw pillows aren't always perfectly arranged. It's a small kind of messiness, but it feels like progress. I see Mateo occasionally, usually at industry events or the coffee shop near his office. We're friendly in the way that people are when they've shared something meaningful that didn't work out, when there's affection without awkwardness, gratitude without regret. He's seeing someone new, a photographer named David who makes him laugh in a way I never quite managed. When he mentions him, his eyes light up with the kind of uncomplicated joy I always hoped someone would feel about me. I'm happy for him. I mean that, which surprises me sometimes. There's no jealousy, no sense of loss, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that good people find each other when the timing is right. Owen moved to Portland 6 weeks after our conversation. He got a job teaching at a middle school there, coaching cross-country, and starting over in a city where no one knows his history. We've talked twice, brief phone calls that felt like checking in on someone from a different life. He sounds different, lighter maybe, like the act of finally telling the truth freed something in him that had been trapped for years. He's seeing a therapist, he told me during our last conversation, trying to figure out who he is when he's not afraid of himself. We don't talk about what happened between us, don't analyze or rehash or try to make sense of it. Some truths are too big to fit into casual conversation. This morning, I opened the drawer beside my bed and took out the letters I wrote 3 months ago. The paper has yellowed slightly at the edges, and my handwriting looks foreign, like it belongs to someone I used to be. I read them slowly, surprised by how raw they still sound, how much pain and hope I managed to compress into a few pages. Then I folded them carefully and walked to the park near the lake, where I'd gone to think so many times during those confused weeks when everything was changing. I found a bench near the water and left the letters there, weighted down with a smooth stone so they wouldn't blow away. And signed, anonymous, just words released into the world for whoever might need them. Tonight, I'm back on the rooftop where all of this started, where I sat with Owen's unanswered text burning a hole in my pocket and no idea how to respond. The October air is crisp again, a year later, and the city spreads out below me in the same pattern of lights and shadows and other people's stories. But this time, there are no messages waiting for reply. No phone buzzing with complications I can't untangle. No desperate need to figure out what anyone else wants from me or what I'm supposed to want in return. Just quiet. Just the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of traffic and the kind of peace that comes not from having all the answers, but from finally being comfortable with the questions. I'm alone up here, but it doesn't feel lonely anymore. It feels honest. Like I've stopped performing the version of myself I thought everyone else needed and started being whoever I actually am underneath all the careful distances and protected feelings. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I'll fall in love again, or if Owen and I will ever find a way to be in each other's lives without breaking something important, or if the letters I left in the park will mean anything to whoever finds them. But for the first time in longer than I can remember, not knowing feels like enough. Not happy exactly, Not resolved in any way that would satisfy the part of me that likes neat endings and clear answers, but real in a way that happiness and resolution never quite managed to be. The city lights blur for a moment, but not from tears this time. Just from the wind picking up, reminding me that seasons change and people change, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let them. I sit here a while longer, watching the world continue its quiet work below me, and I think about all the different ways a story can end. How sometimes the most honest ending is the one that doesn't end at all, that just transforms into something new and uncertain and true. When I finally go inside, I leave the rooftop door unlocked. Not because I'm expecting anyone, but because some spaces are meant to be open, meant to hold whatever comes next without trying to control what that might be. The elevator carries me down to my apartment, to my imperfect life, to whatever tomorrow might ask of me. And for the first time in years, I'm ready to find out what that is.